Barry, good to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat with me. I really appreciate that.
Oh,
Partly
it's
I
a pleasure.
appreciate it because you've got such an interesting proposition to talk about. Um, when we last, I want to kick off by reflecting to you something that we talked about last time we spoke. And one of the things that you said to me was, "I like to buck the system." And you've done that kind of consistently for in a number of occasions. And you say, well, I mean, tell us why you like bucking the system, and more importantly, tell us how your latest product or business is going to buck the system because it's a really interesting proposition.
Oh boy. Why? It might be just my nature. I don't know, but I, I've I've had quite an interesting career, and what I've done is I've found myself experiencing areas of vacuum. What I mean by that is areas where something needed to be done,
Hmm.
and nobody was willing to do it because it kind of rubbed uh, the zeitgeist the wrong way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so I did that. My original career was I was a neuroscientist at Harvard and Mass General. I was on staff. Have my doctorate in neuroscience. And what happened was uh, I had a situation where, well, I was doing some very interesting research at Harvard and Mass General. My work, focused on how the brain processed information,
Yeah.
perception,
Yeah.
memory, and
Yeah.
that stuff. But I was also interested in medical imaging, digital medical imaging. This is the 80s when digital really was just beginning. Digital imaging was just beginning, even in medicine. So I had a lot of the best toys to play with from Siemens and from GE, PET scans and MRIs and all of that stuff, which was pretty much science fiction. It started to make mainstream, but it was still pretty much science fiction. And I started to look at those and figure out ways of enhancing the diagnostic value of it. And so I created some 3D reconstruction algorithms for computers and back then, there was no Apple, there was no IBM computers or anything like that, no desktop computers. So I was using a lot of medical application computers to do all of this stuff, but I was applying color um, to X-rays and
Right.
various types of imaging to try and improve the diagnostic value. Well, what happened was I was at Harvard for quite some time, doing a lot of good research and doing. I've got a lot of peer-reviewed articles for my science, but some all of a sudden some Hollywood types came to me. They were Al Kasha, two-time Oscar winner, and Peter Engel, who's one of the most prolific NBC producers, and also Bernie Weitzman, who was part of headed up Desilu Studios, Lucille Ball and all of that.
Well,
And they came to me because they had an issue, and they had an issue because they wanted to find a way to create digital colorization of black and white movies.
right.
And that was I felt that was interesting, and if it wasn't for the fact that these were heavyweights that were legitimate, I would have said, yeah, that's nice. I'm not interested. But they had Ted Turner in the background, who was very interesting. And if
Right.
you know Ted Turner is the one who started CNN.
Yeah. He just
And,
passed
and
away, hasn't
he
he? Just recently.
just recently, yeah.
Yeah.
And what Ted wanted to do is he wanted to buck the system, and he said, "I'm going to create a channel that for with 24-hour news." And everybody said, "You're crazy. Who's going to watch that?" Well, it became extremely successful. But as a billionaire, he had a lot of other interests as well. He bought the MGM library, and the MGM library with Casablanca and King Kong and all of those great movies. And the problem was that a lot of them were in black and white, and eventually they were going to fall into public domain. So he said, if they went into public domain, then the asset value of that film library was going to deplete. So he realized that if you colorize a black and white movie, and there was an analog version that was very, very bad, it deserved all of the um, criticism
Mm.
that it got. I mean, it had Shirley Temple with a little halo around her face, an orange halo, and that kind of thing. But he said if you could find a digital a way of doing it so that it looked photoreal, then what would happen is he can get a 75-year copyright. Now it's 95 years, but 75-year copyright on the colorized version.
Right.
So he basically so these guys from Hollywood said, okay, this is a gold mine. We just have to find a way to do it. So they had three failed attempts, and they finally went to Stanford Research for some advice, see if there's anybody there. They said, well, you have to look at medical imaging, and they pointed to me because they were aware of some of the stuff I was doing. So basically, I said, yeah. When they came to me and asked me to do this, I said, yeah, I know, I would know how to do that. Because basically, feature film is no different than adding color to an X-ray using image processing and machine vision. It's just that there are about 120,000 of them in a movie, so you have to be able to do it efficiently. So, to make a long story short, I took a leave of absence from Harvard, and I went to came to San Diego, primarily because I had to be close to a third world country because I understood that what I was developing was going to be very, very labor intensive,
Mm.
and I had to be 30 miles from north of San Diego of Mexico was a great place to be, wonderful climate as well. So I went out there, went there, and um, I basically invented it, there was enough horsepower, PR horsepower in this thing to make a big splash, but Hollywood wanted nothing of it because they were basically they were against colorization anyway, because it was horrible in quality. But now they said this is of really great quality. What's going to happen is people are going to see one of these movies like Casablanca and the others, and they're going to think that that's the way it was originally produced,
Mm.
and it really wasn't. That's not how the director wanted it, which is not true. They just didn't have the budget, or there's a lot of reasons why they didn't. But they were accusing me of destroying our American film heritage. In reality, I was actually preserving it because a lot of these public domain films were not worth restoring. And in order to colorize them, you had to create a pristine copy,
And
digital
did
copy.
Ted Turner still want them colorized?
Pardon me?
Did
Did he what?
Ted Turner still want them colorized?
Oh, he very much wanted them colorized. He wanted his library colorized, and he ended up coming to my studio and seeing what I was doing because I did some work for Republic Pictures, Sands of Iwo Jima and Bells in St. Mary's, and those were my first two movies. He took a look at them, and he basically told his people, give him anything he wants. So I got 36 movies a year from Ted. And that was just a start because all the other studios jumped in too, including Disney and all the rest. So, but nevertheless, there were congressional hearings against this. There was Sam Houston who came in with a wheelchair and everything like that, and basically you don't touch Maltese Falcon and Woody Allen, all these people very, virtue signaling like crazy about how this is the worst thing that could ever happen to feature films. It's kind of looking back, it's really ridiculous because look where we are today with deep fake and all of that business. I
Yeah.
mean, what I was doing was trivial compared to that.
Yeah. So how did that if you like that first run up against conventional wisdom, that first run up against the establishment, how did that lead you to where you are now and what you're doing now? Because I mean, essentially you're taking on the education system, aren't you? So tell us about how you jumped from taking on the world of movies to taking on the education sector.
Well, I mean, just like, I was kind of thrust into the whole colorization thing. Later on, I got into 3D, and I developed a technology for converting movies from 2D to 3D. That was bucking against a lot of directors who said, no, no, you can only do it natively with cameras. Well, no, my technology became the de facto method of doing 2D to 3D, 3D movies. So we did most of the movies that came out of Hollywood between 2009 and 2017 during the highlight of the, the most important years of 3D. But then I left that after the 3D fad kind of dropped out. I gave the company to my son. He took care of it, and I found myself in a situation where I wanted to get into augmented reality and virtual reality. That was the newest thing, and that was the thing that I really wanted to start looking at. But I got sidetracked because I got a call from a friend who was working at a university, Westcliff University, and he said, this is a great university. It's very entrepreneurial, and but it doesn't have an entrepreneurial culture. And with all that you've done over the decades, basically leading the charge in a lot of different areas, and bucking the system, um, I'd like to introduce you to the president of the university, Dr. Anthony Lee. And so I met Dr. Lee, wonderful guy, young guy, and he had a tiger by the tail for the most part. This is a great university, but it was just starting. He just got accredited, and I mean, it was actually started in 1993, but he really kicked it into gear, and he started to the enrollment started to increase exponentially. But he really wanted to create something much more than a university with he had a law school. He had actually the oldest law school in Orange County, a College of Business, College of Technology and Engineering, a College of Education. And he had other big plans, like a nursing school, which ultimately came in, and a health science center. But he really wanted to create an aura of uh, entrepreneurship on the campus. So he showed me this was during COVID, and he took me into his newly renovated campus because he had to make room for some of the other things he was doing, like, for instance, law school. And he took me into one room and I said, and this is where the incubator is going to be, the startup incubator. I said, oh, you have an incubator? He said, no, you're going to create the incubator.
Right.
So I said, oh, okay. Well, it just so happens that prior to this, I was involved with an incubator, one of the largest ones in Southern California, called Evo Nexus. And I actually raised 19 million for one of my startups, Legend Films, from that organization before it became an incubator, and then it became one of the first advisors to the incubator. And they were funded by Qualcomm and all of them, some really big heavyweights. And so when COVID happened, all of the companies in the incubator were going virtual. But there were a whole bunch of companies that said, no, we want to be co-located, and we want to be able to communicate and everything. We don't want to go into this whole COVID lockdown stuff. So the general manager of the Irvine campus, basically of Evo Nexus, contacted me and said, Barry, I've got the situation. I've got some really good companies that really want to continue on. Do you have any room? Do you have any ideas? Any room at Westcliff? And I said, as a matter of fact, I do. I've got a whole wing here that's waiting to have an incubator. So I interviewed a bunch of the companies, and I found the five best ones. And I said, I've got space for you, and you can come in. All you need to do for this space and all of the support is interact with faculty and students, lecture, become invited lectures to the some of the courses, and that's basically it. So that turned out to be a really great experience.
And how,
Um,
Barry, and how did that lead you to the Socratic metric, which is the thing that we were going to talk about? I mean, it's a fascinating story. I still don't quite get how you made the jump to Socratic method metric.
Well, let's take a giant leap to uh, November 30th,
Right.
2022. That was a very special day in uh, in education, higher ed in particular, because that was the debut of ChatGPT. And I was doing my thing at Westcliff, with a lot of the students and trying to build a culture on campus. And I saw what was going on with the professors, and the professors were kind of wringing their hands, like, "What are we going to do?" I mean, initially they thought it was a curiosity, but then it became very, very clear that the students were going to be able to use that to actually do essays without even doing the essays. There's something called discussion questions, which are basically a professor puts out a question, and each student answers the question, and then a couple of students critique each other's questions and stuff like that. That's why they're called discussion questions. So between discussion questions and essays, that was the only real way for a professor to assess a student's knowledge of what was being taught.
And just to be clear, what you're saying is that ChatGPT or AI has now made that assessment process essentially obsolete because students can use AI to do that. Is that what you're
It
saying?
became more and more clear
Yeah.
that the professors were complaining, I'm not grading students, I'm grading ChatGPT.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because so they put up this discussion question. The students would put that into ChatGPT. ChatGPT would answer the question, then they would cut and paste and put it back in. And then another student would look at what they did in ChatGPT, put that into ChatGPT, have a critique of that, and cut and paste and put it in there. So nobody's learning anything,
Yeah.
and
So
ChatGPT is doing all the work.
yeah, so tell me, I mean, and that's I can see why that's a problem. So tell me about Socratic metric then, because that
Well,
Socratic metric, as I understand it, is essentially a way to solve that problem.
yeah. It became clear to me that authenticity was lost. There
Mm.
was no way of, I mean, professors were saying, look, geez, the only way we can possibly assess whether a student did an essay is to talk to them one-on-one
Yeah,
and quiz them about it. But he said, that's not feasible because I've got 100 students or I've got 50 students. I can't scale that. So it came to me, click, all right, what if I create an algorithm that will actually do that? I mean, and not only that, but do it in an authentic way. Have the student actually verbalize
mm,
a defense of their essay or whatever, as well as uh, respond to questions about all of the lecture notes and everything for the past 2 weeks. What do I have if I had a chance to do that? And they could not use Socratic metric. I mean, they could not use ChatGPT to answer. And so I created uh, I applied for a patent for this idea because I think I had it all worked out. It wasn't terribly difficult for me to do that because it sort of all fit into place. And just like colorization and 3D and all that stuff, it fit into the key fit into the hole. And I said, okay, this is a good way to go. Well, I won that. I got that patent. Patent was issued within 4 months.
wow.
And so ChatGPT came out in 2022. I had a patent within 1 year of that, which is pretty remarkable.
So
And so I
just,
brought
we just, I mean, so just for people that are watching, just explain then, so that people to help people understand who've not come across the product. I mean, how does Socratic metric work? I mean, not in the sense of the algorithm, but if I was a student, I mean, how would it work? I mean, just give us a practical illustration of the way it would work
okay.
if you're studying at a university.
All right. The way it works is, let's say you're a professor, and you've in say the entrepreneurial mindset is your course or whatever. You've given a lecture, you've got some textbooks that you're involved with, and you may have some lecture notes. You also may have a TEDx lecture,
Right.
well, on YouTube. Well, you take all of that content that you've presented to the students over the past 2 weeks, and you curate that within Socratic metric. You just load it up to Socratic metric. That's all Socratic metric knows. It's not going out into the internet for any reason. As a matter of fact, it's protected from the internet because we have FERPA laws here, which protect students. So we want to keep them away from the internet.
So it just
But what,
uses the content that's relevant to the
that's
course.
right.
Yeah.
But they can also upload the essay that a student actually produced, put that in there as
Right.
well as curated content. So it's all personalized. All right. Then what they can do is they can establish the type of question that they're going to ask. It's additive, adaptive, or hypothetical. Hypothetical, obviously, you make up a situation and have them respond to that. Additive is just a typical, a list of questions that aren't related. And adaptive is it it listens to your answer and then goes on and tries to ask you more
Right.
questions like
Right.
that. Then it also has the ability for the professor to list how many iterations they would present. So in other words, a student would answer a question and then it would get immediate feedback as well as suggestions on how to improve that answer. And then they would have four more iterations, opportunities to improve it without repeating what they already did. But as they go through those iterations, they're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the content. So it's not only assessing what they know, it's also teaching them.
It's helping them to learn, isn't it? Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then they have as a professor, you can also put the difficulty level, hard, medium, or easy. Okay, so that's it. So what happens is a student, they send a link to this to each student, and actually it's within the learning management system. So there's one overall learning management system that universities have. So within that learning management system, there's a link, and they click on that, and it's basically a homework type thing. And what they have to do is they can't cut and paste anything. We even have a video monitoring that we use sometimes. But the student has to, first of all, the question comes up. Um, they have to actually read the question out loud. Now, this is based on my neuroscience background because there's something called the production effect and the generation effect. And the production effect simply says that if you verbalize something that you're reading, you're actually creating multiple neural pathways.
So it helps you.
Uh,
It helps you remember it.
it not only helps you remember it, but it also focuses your attention because
Yeah.
otherwise you have internal attention, and the internal attention is easily disrupted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at Westcliff, we have about 80% of the students are foreign. So a lot of them have very, very strong accents.
Right.
And the algorithm that I created is very forgiving of these accents. So what they have to do is they have to read the question out loud, and it's recorded, and they have to get it 70% correct. And in order to do that, sometimes they have to, if you have a very heavy accent, you have to slow down and enunciate. And what we found is as a soft secondary skill, this really helps a lot of students with their accents
Right.
a lot over time. So you have to read the question and then you have to answer, and you can't go on until you've read that and got 70% correct. Then you answer it verbally. And the idea is that you answer it verbally without any preparation at all. We don't want you reading it. We don't want you to
Okay.
create an essay and then
So
read
it's all
that.
about what's in your head.
What's up here right now?
Yeah.
And the last thing we're looking for is perfection. We don't want perfection. Forget about all the flaws of your presentation, like me, stuttering and all of that. I want that. We want that. And the Socratic metric pretty much ignores all of that and and transcribes what they say. So again, then they answer that question verbally, and then it immediately gives them feedback, immediately tells them uh, uh, what they got right, what they didn't get right, and how they could improve on that answer. And then they answer it again, and they can have up to four different iterations. So we have five questions typically, but the faculty member can choose between, one and five. Typically, it's about five. And what we've found is that it not only is a much more accurate reflection on student learning outcomes, but it also uh, makes them they have greater engagement over time in a course because they've already practiced this, they've already verbalized it, especially the foreign students. They are typically very quiet and reserved. And what this does is it brings them out because I've already done it. I've already said it, so I can say it now in
So
class.
to summarize then, it helps them learn and it helps you assess what they've learned,
Exactly.
which is why it's a bit of a solution to the chat GPT problem where people are just using chat GPT to do the stuff, to do write the essays.
And yes, and in fact, no university has the solution to this other than Westcliff right now, and we're offering this as a SaaS model. But the thing is that what they're doing is they're using things like uh, um Turnitin. Turnitin
Yeah, I've
a
come
company.
across it. Yeah.
You've heard of that? Well, at ASU GSV, which is a big ed tech conference here in San Diego, it was during one of the sessions, it was very clear that that's not working because out of 200 million essays that were submitted, 22 million of them were false positives. And that's a significant
Big
issue
proportion, actually. Yeah.
well, I mean, you're not going to accuse a student of cheating unless you're absolutely certain. And if there's false positives, that could be a liability for a university,
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
But that's it. But right now, in terms of universities all over the country, and in the United States, and probably the world, but the United States is what I'm mainly aware of. That's the little checkbox they're using for accreditation and stuff like that. Okay, we've got it all covered. Check,
Mm.
turn in. So the fact of the matter is that we've got a lot of universities who cannot reliably state what their student learning outcomes are, nor what their program learning outcomes are. And what does that mean in terms of the degree, the diploma they're actually awarding these students? How valuable is that if we don't even know what they've learned?
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty profound problem that you're working on there, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And there's nevertheless there's resistance to using AI in any form whatsoever, even using AI to protect against AI. So it's a hard task to get in an industry and an institution that is so entrenched in the old way of doing things to start to think differently.
Mm.
But what we're finding is that Socratic metric is great for HR, uh, for employment, for all sorts of things in industry because I've got one company that's very interested in this. In fact, they're becoming a reseller, and they have to hire engineers and technicians to manage some very, very sophisticated pipelines for feature films and that sort of thing. And they're finding that or many of the engineers and technicians are faking their uh, resumes using AI. But even worse than that, in telephone call interviews, they're cloning their voices and having ChatGPT answer the questions,
Mm.
believe it or not. I mean, that's
I can believe it. I
beyond.
mean, I've heard similar things in other places. So it's quite, it's a bit of a problem, isn't it? So
Oh, it's
let me just get this right. So what you're saying is not only has it got applications in kind of conventional higher education, you think it's also got applications to help companies that need to sort of develop, upskill, train, whatever language you want to use, their own people, so
that's
that you
right.
know that it's been done properly and that those people have
Yeah,
learned. So it takes it kind of beyond the kind of compliance stuff, which is about ticking a box. I've done the health and safety course. You're talking about a next step forward, aren't you?
next step. Yeah, in fact, I even have publishers, textbook publishers that are
Mm,
interested in this because they're providing the content, but they what they don't have is an assessment layer.
mm.
And if we can merge the two, basically couple Socratic metric with their textbook offerings, then we've got a full package. And some of them are really getting interested in some of the bigger ones.
Yeah. So let me ask you, where are you going with this? I mean, it's a great proposition, and I think it's very timely, and for the reasons we just talked about. I mean, you can see why anyone in the kind of education, professional development world is worried about assessing what people have learned, because that,
Yeah.
so problematic at the moment. I mean, where are you going with this? I mean, what does success look like to you?
Well, right now, Westcliff is the majority owner of this. It formed a joint venture, but Westcliff pretty much owns it. One of the reasons is because, uh, I've I've I started a number of successful companies. I've been very successful as an entrepreneur, but I'm at an age right now where I don't want to pound the sidewalks trying to sell
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not only
Yeah.
that, yeah, but not only that, I needed an institution, a reputable institution to basically get behind it. And fortunately, Anthony Lee is very entrepreneurial and very willing to do that. So, I mean, he's a godsend. So the thing is that I've got that, and we've got a number of universities, very significant universities, that are doing pilots on it, using it.
Right.
And I have a number of resellers in industry. So, and the enterprise market is wide open for this, and as well as government. I've got some people in aerospace who are interested. I mean, give you an example of um, how this is working. Uh, Elon Musk has a horrible reputation as a manager.
Does he? Right. Okay. I didn't know that, but I can believe it.
Well, one of the things he does is he'll go into SpaceX and in the halls, and he'll see an engineer and he'll stop him in the middle of a corridor and ask him a question about the thrust profile of the rocket engines or whatever, and the engineer has to answer right then and there orally, verbally, and if he gets it wrong, he may not have a job. Well, that's what Socratic metric is doing, but it's doing it at scale. And it's doing it
And is that a good, is that, I mean, in terms of the employees involved, is that a good thing? I mean, I get the point about helping people to learn. That seems to me to be really valuable.
yeah.
But what somebody like Elon Musk is doing, I mean, that's going to create a kind of bit of a culture of fear potentially, isn't it? Is that going to help people learn and develop? I mean, I'm
Well,
not
I don't know about that, but it's going to get us to Mars. It's going to create tunnels.
right.
you
So is
know,
Elon Musk using this, is he?
yeah, what it's doing is it's bringing meritocracy back into the
Right.
picture, and you either have it or you don't have it,
Okay.
and you're going to be tested on it, and you're not going to be coddled, and that's the way he is. So yeah, I mean, management style is not textbook,
Mm.
and but it's bucking the system and it's getting stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see the point that you're making. I mean, perhaps it's just I'm showing my age. I mean, I would be pretty scared to be in an organization where that was happening, but maybe that's my age. Let me ask you about the kind of journey that you've gone. I mean, when you look back on your journey, how would you say your successes and failures have influenced the way you've built what you're doing now? I mean, let's talk about the failures first. I mean, what is it from your past, or what, in what way has failure shaped the way that you've built this product and this business? We'll talk about successes in a second.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because failure. I mean, I teach a workshop on entrepreneurship, and you learn from failure. You don't learn that much from success.
Generally, yeah.
And fortunately, my failures have been pretty much incremental. They've been manageable, very manageable. But I think that the way if I were going to put one thing as my success equation, it would be not allowing anything to define me. Um, I spent a lot of time at universities getting my doctorate in neuroscience and building a career at Harvard and Mass General. I mean and being getting published and all of that. People would say, "Hey, that's success." Well, I threw it all away, pretty much,
Mm.
uh, for an opportunity in Hollywood, but only because I knew for a fact that the people I was dealing with were legitimate and that I could solve their problem. So I said, that's an interesting thing. I'm going to leave neuroscience over here and I'm going to go do this. I'm going to use a lot of the stuff that I learned in medicine, in digital imaging, I'm going to use it over here.
Mm. Yeah. No,
That's the way yeah. So, and each one of my startups have had a theme of imaging, digital imaging, up until now, all the way through. And each one of my startups has been remarkably successful in Hollywood.
oh, cool. And what about the flip side? So if failure has had a really powerful but positive impact, I mean, tell me about the impact that success has had. I mean, we just talked a second ago, but it's much harder to learn from success. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very easy. When something goes wrong, you think, oh God, I'm not going to do that again. How do I fix it? When you've been successful, I mean, mentally, it's like, well, great. I've just, you don't tend to spend time reflecting after a win, if you see what I mean.
Oh, no, no,
How
no,
have
no.
your successes impacted on the way you built the business then?
Well, I use those successes to build upon. I mean, I'm not satisfied with just one thing. Like for instance, with 3D, at the same time I was doing 3D, I also created a department for virtual reality, and we created one of the first uh, virtual reality uh, commercials. We used Patron the alcohol. Um, can't remember it. But anyway, it was a very, very sophisticated commercial with using drones and using 360 cameras and using CGI. It was kind of groundbreaking because I saw that that was the direction we were going. But then I realized after a while, no, virtual reality is not going to be the future. There are too
And why
many.
do you say that? Because I know a lot of other people that would disagree with that. I mean, why do you say that?
Well, it's not going to be a consumer product because it's too cumbersome. Uh, people have trouble with 3D glasses for crying out loud. They're not going to have a big goggles on here. I mean, that was one of the biggest problems with 3D. Oh, we have to wear glasses? I'll wait till 3D is glassless. Well, virtual reality is that many times over.
Mm.
So I recognized it wasn't going to be virtual reality, it's going to be augmented reality.
Right.
So I started working more on augmented reality and I ended up doing some really important stuff. Like for instance, I did the Super Bowl is huge here. And the halftime show is huge. So about 5 years ago, I think it was, I did the halftime show with a singer called The Weeknd. And what I did was I created the augmented reality you can use with your phone, and it basically showed the weekend. Um, it, basically, you can see it in your living room, a passageway where you go in and you've got all of this stuff going on all over the place in your living room, and then you see the weekend going out onto the stage, and then when you actually watch the Super Bowl, you see him coming out the stage in the front. what you're doing is basically seeing the backstage version of it
Mm.
using augmented reality, and that was cool. That was groundbreaking. So I decided that that's probably going to be the future, and it is going to be the future. In fact, Apple's going to be coming out with an augmented reality glasses that I think is going to be groundbreaking. We've already got some stuff with Facebook, Meta. Meta already has something like that as well. That's going to be the future.
Right. Okay. And let me ask you something about, again, the way you're passed and kind of going up against conventional wisdom. How has that shaped your views about risk, would you say? I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with somebody the other day who was saying he didn't worry about making mistakes because that wasn't the big risk. The big risk was not exploiting the opportunity. Yeah, which I thought was a really interesting sort of take. Most people worry about making mistakes. He was saying, no, the thing to worry about is missing out on the opportunity. I mean, how have your experiences, the businesses that you built in the past, and perhaps this one, I mean, how have they
Yeah.
influenced how you think about risk?
Well, I mean, the old cliche, no risk, no reward.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it, I epitomized that from when I was at Harvard, and I took the huge risk. I left my family in Boston, and took a leave of absence from Harvard, and came all the way across the country, and opened up a studio and built something from scratch that turned out to be colorization, digital colorization. That's a huge risk because
Yeah.
once you leave
Yeah. Yeah.
academia, once you leave the research area and you stop publishing, it's very difficult to get back. So it was a huge risk, but I felt it was worth it.
Yeah. And to what extent have you, as you've built this business and perhaps the other ones, to what extent have you had situations where, if you like, the business has gone beyond your expertise? Have you had experiences like that?
Um, yes, yes. And to be very frank, a lot of entrepreneurs like myself, startup entrepreneurs like myself, are great at building things from scratch.
Mm,
But I get very bored once they're operational and they become routine. And frankly, I got colorization to the point where we were doing up to 7 movies a month. And this was when I had a studio in Mexico. My second iteration of colorization in 2000, I had it in India. But and that was fun to be have a multinational company and all of that production company and studio and visual effects. But it became very routine. And well, I was dealing with a lot of very difficult directors, Michael Bay and the rest. Uh, they the operation, the day-to-day operation became uh, less exciting. So it's very important for entrepreneurs to recognize what they're good at, what they're not good at.
mm,
And what I did was I turned it over to people um, who can maintain the status quo and keep it going. And I could look at possibly exploring other avenues. So
mm.
that's why I got into virtual reality and augmented reality.
Yeah. And as you've gained experience, would you say it's changed the way you, or perhaps the way you define good decision making? I mean, has it changed the way you make decisions, those experiences?
Yeah, I always have to check myself to make sure that I'm the right person. I'm still the right person for a particular job. Because you can fall into a false sense of security and
Mm,
think that, oh, nobody can do this other than me. Well, it's not true. There are a lot of people who can do it better than you, and they may not have the same sense for experimentation and risk taking, but they can certainly operate a business better than you. And frankly, I never had a business course ever, and that has been a huge drawback for me.
so you would
Uh,
suggest if somebody wants to do what you're doing, that they take a business course?
you have to know it. You have to have
Mm.
some kind of foundation in business and finance, definitely.
Yeah.
As successful as I've been, I could be many times more successful if I had some knowledge of business and finance because everybody took advantage of me and tried to take advantage of me.
Mm.
Um, because, it was this guy from Harvard who didn't know anything about business, and they knew that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And people will, won't they? I mean, it's a competitive world out there. And when you look back, let me ask you about some of those decisions. What would you say has cost you the most? Bad decisions or delayed decisions? I mean, I'm trying to get at one of the issues is that I think people often avoid making decisions, and actually the outcome from that can be worse. I mean, what's cost you more, a bad decisions or delayed decisions, would you say?
I don't think I've delayed anything because I've always um, been very proactive in
Right.
everything. Um, in terms of bad decisions, uh, I'm trying to think of some bad. So I may have completely dismissed any bad decisions I've made because I can't think of any. I mean, they're small, they're very small stuff, but nothing dramatic. Because I think I've been very strategic and very careful in my decisions within this bubble of risk taking. I think I've they've been incremental. They haven't been huge.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, well done on that. I mean, I don't know, I've made loads of mistakes, me. Loads of bad decisions, but maybe that's just me. Let me ask you a couple of questions before we wind up. So, um, if you were starting from scratch, what would you do differently, perhaps, knowing what you know now?
Um, well, it's interesting because I think to some extent there's one book by Eric Ries called um, the I can't even think
The
of the
lean
name right.
startup.
The Lean Startup. Lean
Yeah.
Startup. And I teach, in fact, I teach a workshop on Lean Startup framework. And it's fascinating. And what I realized that was that that's actually what I had always been doing,
Okay. So it
but
mirrors what your practice is.
I've been doing it organically, yeah, without even knowing it. And the idea is if you have to know your market, you have to know if somebody actually wants your product before you actually build that product. And fortunately, I've been in a situation where um, people have come to me with a problem, or I've discovered a problem that is absolutely 100% essential for progress.
Mm,
Socratic metric is one of those. It's absolutely essential. There's no other solution out there right now. I wish there were more solutions, but there
mm,
are none.
mm,
So, and this again, the same thing with colorization in 3D. There were no other solutions. So, I think that the lean startup framework is probably, I'm trying to remember the original question, but the lean startup framework is something that I've lived through and I've done. And when I read Eric Ries's book, I said, yeah, that's absolutely 100% right on target. And I think I've done that without even knowing it.
mm. I mean, my question was, just to bring you back to it, my question was, is there anything you do differently, knowing what you know? I mean,
Oh,
what you're saying is you've done the lean startup kind of methodology without reading the book, which is so you're doing it anyway. Is there anything you would do differently, knowing what you know now? Anything that you would perhaps change?
well, I did get involved with this is a semi mistake. I got involved with a startup in education
Right.
in back in the mid 90s. And very reputable people, uh, and it became very big. In fact, it went public, and it was valued at close to $1 billion at one point, which
Well,
was pretty remarkable. But it was during the time when digital was just happening, and the telcos and the cable companies were vying for the home. Nobody knew what was going to happen with digital television.
mm,
They realized there was going to be 500 channels. Well, there's more than 500 channels now, but they didn't know how many there were going to be. And this one person who had this vision, who came from a much larger online education company, thought that, well, if we can own the living room, if we own the kids, we we own the house. So basically, what they want to do is to create a set-top box or be part of the
Right.
set-top box in environment and send courses to kids, edutainment,
Yeah, yeah.
education that was basically animation that teaches kids the basics. I'm talking about K6. Wasn't higher ed. And I realized after a while that it was kind of a scam.
All right.
Yeah, first of all, uh, none of the digital companies were ready for it. There were and it was a big lobbying effort in Washington. People were funding politicians to to do things their way. There were it, it was improper funding and stuff like that. So it was messy. It was messy. It was dirty, and it was later sold to a much larger education company. So it was successful. A lot of people made a lot of money.
Mm. Are you saying
Um,
that you shouldn't have got involved with them or that you shouldn't have invested in them?
I wish I had not gotten involved, and the educators were not terribly intelligent the way that they were creating the curriculum, frankly.
I mean,
Yeah.
the edutainment idea has been around a long time, hasn't it? I mean, I remember watching things like Sesame Street, which was about
Oh yeah.
how they taught literacy to young people, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Using television. I mean, so it's not a new idea. It's just kind
No,
of
this would be
evolved and, isn't it?
yeah, this was before that. I think I don't know when Sesame Street started, but I think it was before Sesame Street. Um, and I brought in uh, some really good writers and animation writers, and
Right.
I built an animation studio to do it because it had to be done the traditional way. So, that's why I was brought in for the entertainment value of it. But it was a dead end as far as I was concerned. So, I mean, I left that and then I reinvented colorization and became significantly more successful than I was initially.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about entrepreneurship, isn't it? Sometimes you end up going down a dead end or down the wrong rabbit hole, as it were. So, I mean, I
Yeah,
totally,
and you have to know when to leave.
yeah,
And
yeah, it's part of how you learn, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, and I recognize I've got better things to do.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I totally get that. Let me ask you one last question. So, if you were going to offer some advice, I mean, you've got a lot of experience. You've been around a long time, been through multiple companies, multiple iterations of products and things. I mean, if you were to give a piece of advice to a rookie CEO starting out now, what would you say is the most important thing for them to think about?
Well, every one of my startups was created with me in an empty room and a computer. Every single one of them, nothing more than that. And then what I did was I built a critical mass of people, not necessarily expert in anything, but people who could wear any hat. Last thing I did was, I mean, at the university, sometimes we have these uh, courses where students have a certain amount of money and they have to start a company. The first thing they do is they go into a textbook and they see what an org chart looks like.
Right.
They say, well, the first thing I'm going to do is start with an HR department, and I'm going to have all of these people, CFO. So no, it doesn't work that way. No, what you have to do is first of all build a critical mass of people who first of all have the same vision as you do, and who can do everything. I mean, at each one of my companies, basically, I ended up just taking out the garbage. I mean, that's how
I mean,
startup it was.
I often think CEO means chief everything officer if you're in an early stage business.
They do, but
Yeah,
but everybody has to be chief.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Every,
Yeah.
and that's the point. And then those people become your core as you build. And the most important thing that I would tell a startup entrepreneur is that you have to grow organically.
Mm.
You don't throw a bunch of people in a room. That's what happened with uh, Magic Leap. Remember Magic Leap?
Mhm.
Well, yeah, Abra Abovitz was the CEO. He just filled a huge room with everybody with a PhD and just threw them all together and said, "Okay, figure this out." That's
Which
not
you
the way
can
you
do,
do.
which you can do if you've got a lot of money. It's not so easy to do if you're bootstrapping it, though, is it?
No, in fact, the more money you have, the less opportunity,
Yeah,
the
that's
less
right. It's better to have
chances you have
none.
for
Yeah,
success.
yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
the best way to start a company is organically. You don't hire anybody. I mean, I remember when I first started colorization, way back in the 80s, I had somebody I knew I had to have somebody doing QA, quality assurance. So they had to look every single frame, make sure everything looked good. And then once we started to get more and more work, she said, I can't do this anymore. I'm making mistakes. So we hired somebody else. All right. We didn't hire anybody until we really needed one. And then that's the way we grew the entire thing. The entire company was grown organically that way. And that's the smartest way to start a company. The last thing you want to do is throw money at it and people at it.
Good advice, I think, Barry. So thank you for taking a bit of time. What a great story and what a great product. I mean, it's such an interesting thing that you're working on. I mean, I know quite a few people in the education world, and you're absolutely right. They're all scratching their heads, wondering how this whole thing about the impact of AI on education is going to shake down. I mean, my take on it, for what it's worth, is it's going to be an interesting few years, I suspect. But anyway,
Oh, yeah.
thank you for coming on. I really appreciate that, and good luck going forward.
Oh, Paul, this has been a real pleasure. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, see you soon, Barry. Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye bye.